You live your life as if you have 1,000 years left to finally start being happy. In a minute, you will realize that you are committing the exact same crime against yourself. By day, the widow smiled, feeding her children the best pieces of meat. But by night, she buried her own dreams in a dusty box under the bed. When the children finally left the house, her eyes suddenly stopped seeing the light. The iron needle pierced the thick linen. A drop of dark crimson blossomed on the pale fabric. The widow did not flinch. She pressed a stained rag to her index finger. The loom demanded motion. The heavy wooden gears ground against each other, churning out yards of coarse fabric for the village merchants. Her son required heavy leather boots for his winter apprenticeship. The widow slid from her wooden stool. She pulled a heavy, iron-bound chest from the shadows beneath her cot. Inside rested a thick glass jar. At the bottom, a pristine mother-of-pearl seashell lay surrounded by a small mound of copper coins. The ticket to the distant coast cost exactly 20 coppers. She possessed 15. She reached in. Her swollen knuckles scraped the narrow glass neck. She extracted 5 coins. The iridescent shell shifted, burying itself deeper under the remaining copper. The work consumed the night. The tallow candle flickered violently in the drafts. A heavy gray film drifted across her left pupil. She rubbed her eyelid with a calloused thumb, attributing the persistent blur to the cheap, oily smoke filling the cramped room. The body keeps a meticulous ledger of every ignored limit. The mind simply refuses to read it. 2 bitter winters ground the wooden floorboards into splinters. Her daughter demanded a silk dress for the spring festival, weeping about her social standing among the valley girls. The widow surrendered her sleep entirely. The loom clattered continuously until the early dawn. The gray film thickened. The edges of her vision frayed into dark, vibrating static. She rubbed the eye harder, pressing until dull sparks danced behind her eyelids. The warning went entirely ignored. She convinced her tired soul that this exhaustion was the righteous currency, purchasing their future prosperity. Then came the final, crushing demand. The son incurred a massive gambling debt in the neighboring town. Men with heavy boots and cold eyes stood on her porch, their silence a promise of violence. They demanded silver. The widow crawled under her bed. Her joints popped. She retrieved the glass jar. The seashell was barely visible beneath the gathered copper. She did not unscrew the metal lid. She raised the heavy jar and smashed the glass against the hearthstone. Shards rained across the gray ashes. She gathered every single coin, scraping her bare palms on the broken glass. The seashell tumbled into the deep soot, entirely forgotten, its beautiful iridescent surface coated in thick ash. She handed the blood-stained coins to the men. They left without a word. She believed she had finally paid the ransom for her own freedom. The leather bags were packed tight. The carriage wheels rattled against the cobblestone path, carrying her children toward their vibrant, independent lives in the capital. The house settled into absolute stillness. She stood alone by the open doorway. The morning sun warmed the deep, tired creases of her cheeks. She swept the hearth, her hands finally moving without the frantic, desperate rhythm of survival. She knelt by the cold ashes. She retrieved the soot-stained seashell, wiping it clean against her white apron. The mother of pearl gleamed perfectly beneath the bright morning light. She withdrew a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. The passage to the ocean. Today was the day. The waiting was over. She brought the shell closer to inspect the polished ridges. The gray film across her pupil crystallized into solid bone. A sharp, burning ache severed the optic nerve. The light permanently snapped shut. Total blackness consumed the room. She did not scream. Her spine locked into an unnatural, rigid pillar. Her jaw parted slightly. The air in the room thickened into wet tar. Dust motes hung suspended in the freezing draft blowing through the open door, no longer visible to her deadened eyes, yet heavy and abrasive against her skin. She stared straight ahead into the infinite, suffocating void. Her pupils, once dark and desperate, solidified into opaque, milky stones. The smell of old ash and rancid tallow magnified, filling her throat. The texture of the paper ticket in her left hand registered as useless, coarse debris. Her lungs refused to expand. The world shrank rapidly to the cold, dark perimeter of her own skull. The illusion of tomorrow evaporated. Her fingers went completely numb. The muscles in her hand went slack. The pristine seashell slipped from her open palm. It fell through the empty air, carving a silent, invisible path downward. A single, hollow clack echoed against the wooden floorboards. You stare at this paralyzed woman, condemning her foolishness. Step closer to the screen. Look directly into the reflection of those milky eyes. You are staring at your own future. You pack your own dreams into a dusty box under the bed. You hand over your vital energy to children, to partners, to ungrateful employers, convincing yourself that your endless sacrifice makes you holy. You call it devotion. Nature calls it slow suicide. You ignore the gray film creeping over your own vitality. You grind your joints into powder, expecting a grand parade at the finish line. The universe issues no rewards for voluntary martyrdom. You carve out pieces of your own flesh to build thrones for people who will never ask if you are bleeding. You live your life as if you have 1,000 years left to finally open that box. But time is an absolute predator. It feeds entirely on the flesh of those who wait. The ocean will roll its waves against the shore for eternity. You will not. You trade the only breathing moments you possess for a tomorrow that holds zero obligation to arrive. The dust settles over your unopened box, burying your unlived life forever. You mourn the time you have lost. But you are entirely blind to the fatal error you will commit again tomorrow morning. A mechanism of self-destruction far worse than patience. Click the video directly in the center of the screen to unearth the paradox of the frozen hound.